Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a story that honestly reads like part political thriller and part internet firestorm. It all starts with the assassination of a major political figure and a theory about why he died that just spread like wildfire. So let's set the scene here, based on the source material we're digging into. We're talking about the very near future, just a year from now, where a single violent event is about to set off a political earthquake. And there it is, the founder of Turning Point USA, a huge voice on the American right, is assassinated. The sources are very specific, killed by a sniper's bullet out in Utah. And almost immediately, the internet just explodes with this one single question. Was he killed because of what he said? This is the explosive theory that erupted within hours of his death. The claim wasn't that his death was random. It was that his death was a direct result of his words. All right, so let's get right into it. How on earth did this narrative of a political assassination get so big so fast? Well, check out this number. The material we're looking at says that in just the 5 days after he died, tweets with the phrase, "Israel killed Charlie Kirk," popped up a staggering 72,000 times. And get this was with zero official evidence. It just shows you how fast a story like this can catch fire online. And you have to understand, this wasn't just random online chatter. The narrative being pushed was super specific. It posits that his killing was payback, a direct consequence of this dramatic ideological U-turn he just made, one that turned some very powerful allies into some very powerful adversaries. So that's the big question, right? What exactly was this ideological shift? To really get the motive being laid out in these sources, you have to look at Kirk's transformation. He went from being one of Israel's biggest cheerleaders to one of its loudest new critics. And wow, just look at the contrast on this slide. It is night and day. On one side, you have the cheerleader. I mean, the guy was literally called a lion-hearted friend of Israel by the prime minister himself. And then, bam, you've got the critic. He's complaining about free speech, warning the former president against foreign policy moves, and even digging into something as explosive as Jeffrey Epstein's alleged ties to Israeli intelligence. It was a total 180. And the thing is, this wasn't some slow, gradual evolution over years. The story describes this incredibly rapid pivot that happened in just a few months. It kicks off with him platforming controversial guests, then he's on major TV shows criticizing the Israeli government, and it all apparently culminates in him rejecting a massive $30 million funding offer. You can see how a sequence of events like that, as the narrative argues, would make some very powerful people very unhappy. So this pivot, the sources suggest, put him on a collision course with what he and others started calling the Zionist bullying machine. Okay, but what does that term actually mean in the context of this story? Well, according to the analysis we're breaking down, it's not being framed as just, normal political lobbying. The idea here is that it's a system designed specifically to sanction and punish dissent, not to engage with it or persuade. And this machine, as it's described, apparently operates using 3 main levers of pressure. First, they go after your wallet, threatening economic consequences and a funding winter. Then, they go after your name, your reputation, using affiliated journalists to damage your character. And finally, there's the psychological pressure, creating this intense environment of fear. And this quote right here, which one source attributes to a TPUSA staffer, wow, it really paints a picture of that alleged psychological impact. The staffer claimed the constant criticism left Kirk genuinely frightened, making him feel as if his entire career was in the crosshairs. Okay, so here's where the story gets much bigger than just Charlie Kirk. The entire narrative around his death is used to make a broader argument, an argument about the dangers of any uncritical ideology, especially when it gets fused with the power of a state. The argument being laid out here is that this kind of dynamic creates risks that spill way beyond one country's borders. We're talking about things like the global marketing of repressive tech, like surveillance and crowd control, or the way criticism of a government's policy gets shut down by conflating it with hate speech. It can even lock a superpower into a specific foreign policy, limiting its options. And here's the real kicker. It creates this dangerous feedback loop where silencing dissent actually ends up fueling the very conspiracy theories it's trying to fight. This line from one of the analyses we looked at, man, it just perfectly sums up the warning at the heart of this whole thing. The idea is that stifling internal debate, no matter the topic, doesn't make a nation stronger. It just makes it numb, unable to sense danger. And that ultimately is what makes it weak. And that leads to this really provocative phrase from the source material: sovereignty without citizenship. The argument is that a foreign lobby effectively gained the power to veto the speech of a major political player in a superpower. It's like exercising a form of sovereignty, of power, without ever having to be accountable to that nation's citizens. So where does all this leave us? What's the takeaway? Well, the narrative around Kirk's death is presented as way more than just a conspiracy theory. The sources frame it as a kind of cautionary tale for our modern political age. And one of the most fascinating twists in all of this is the paradox of Charlie Kirk himself. The sources don't pull any punches. They point out that he was a figure known for his own confrontational, often bullying style. The ultimate bitter irony, they suggest, is that he was allegedly consumed by the very same culture of intolerance that he himself had helped to build. And this is a really key part of the argument. They say that whether the person who pulled the trigger was a lone wolf or part of some grand conspiracy is almost beside the point. The real violence, what they call the structural violence, the attacks on his reputation, on his funding, that had already happened. The silencing, they argue, was already well underway before a single shot was ever fired. And that brings us to the final provocative thought this entire narrative leaves us with. It's a question that's bigger than one man's death or any single political issue. It challenges us all to think about the real cost of silencing debate, regardless of who is being silenced or who is doing the silencing. What happens when the free exchange of ideas breaks down? That's the question at the very heart of this story.